Welcome to Climbing Together, the Small Business Experience. I'm Beth Houtrow, the founder of Climb the Small Business Book Club, and our episode today is brought to us by the Renaissance Entrepreneurship Center of the San Francisco Bay Area. Every episode, I talk to a small business owner about a mistake that they've made and what they learned from the experience. Mistakes are inevitable, perfection's impossible. So let's embrace the mistake. And today we're so excited to welcome Sharon Zimmerman to the podcast. Sharon, tell us a little bit about you and your business.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. So my business is, I'm a jewelry designer focusing on ethically sourced materials, and I'm also a small business consultant focused on ease in your business.
Awesome. That's amazing. And so, we're here to talk about mistakes. And I know you have a long history of being an entrepreneur, but we are often talking about like in the beginning. So talk to me about a mistake or a misconception or just something that went wrong. It doesn't have to be the very beginning, but as you were growing your business.
So it's one, so if any of my followers are watching this, they probably heard me talk about this before, but one of my biggest mistakes a couple of years into my business is I thought I really want to do my first trade show. And in the jewelry industry, trade shows are a big event. It's a big deal. You go, you find buyers from all over the country, and it's supposed to really boost your business, right? You're supposed to get all of these orders, tens of thousands of dollars worth of orders. And I did my first trade show, and I expected to find all of these new accounts, and I was going to get picked up, and it was going to like give my business so much prestige just for being there. And I fell flat on my face. I made zero sales after spending close to $4,000. And this was considered to be a less expensive trade show. Most of them, especially if you're doing the ones on the East Coast, you know, with travel and hotel and the booth fee and everything, will cost you like 10 grand. Right. And I did the show expecting to have these amazing results. And I kind of went in on like a hope and a prayer, as opposed to with preparation and a budget, and understanding how the full process worked. I lacked that understanding completely. And I was just like, I'm just going to like think positive my way through it. And it turned out like, no, there's real money involved with this. And it took me a while to scrape my way back from that loss, because it was just a $4,000, just whoosh, money hold, like it's gone. That was a couple of years into my business. And that was probably one of the bigger mistakes that I made.
Yeah. And like, so what did you learn from that? Like the next time you went, did you do more research? You talk to somebody? Like, how'd you get the guidance to do it better?
Well, I didn't do that particular show again, because I did go back and I did my research, and I found out that it wasn't really a show geared at making sales. It was supposed to be a show geared at maybe finding press or finding connections with magazines, which is totally fine. But that was not my goal going into it. My goal was to make sales. And so I just didn't do that show again. I did some others. But really what I realized from that experience is that I had taken other people's visions of how I should run my business, right? Like everybody was doing it. Lots of people do these shows. It seems like a normal thing to do. And I didn't really question and interrogate whether or not that met my own personal goals, about whether or not it met my own financial goals. And I think if I had to do it all over again, I don't think I would have done that one. I think I would have done things a little bit differently. I even had a mentor at one point tell me like, oh, if you're going to do a trade show, always start with the local ones, because you won't spend a ton of money on travel. And it turned out she was totally right. So I went back and I started doing more local ones first to start building my brand, to build my client list, to build my experience, because trade shows themselves come with their own lingo, their own systems, their own practices. And you need to be seen at some of them multiple times before buyers will buy from you. And so going back and doing these local ones meant that I cut my expenses a ton and built my client list.
And built your experience, right?
And built my experience. Like, it got a lot more comfortable saying, yeah, you should buy this. This is my bestseller, because now I knew it was my bestseller. Because at the same time, I was also putting more effort into direct to consumer sales. And so I was able to now go into those trade shows with a lot more confidence and information. And I'm still not going to tell you that all of them turned out great, because they're very hit or miss, and they are very expensive. And I continued to do them. And then eventually I stopped, because I realized I was just pouring a ton of money into something that wasn't my vision for my business.
Yeah. Okay. That's awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, that is super valuable. And they're just, I think that, like you said, this problem of this is how other people are doing it, so I have to do it that way too, right? It's just
Hmm.
such a, especially with social media and people just get, like guaranteed this worked for me, so it'll work for you, that kind of nonsense
Right.
messaging. It's like, not, it's
It's not.
individual, right? It's for each person, each business, each circumstance. Yeah.
Well, and
So,
it also has to be a part of how you envision not just your business, but maybe your life,
yes.
right? Like a lot of the questions that I ask my clients are, is this decision going to help fund your life? Are you going to feel good about doing it? Because the other thing about trade shows is they're exhausting.
Yeah, I
It's a
bet.
week on your feet, it's preparation, it's stress, it's strain, it's travel, it's all of this stuff. And, for some of us, it's like, maybe that's not what I value. Maybe I
Yeah.
value like a quieter, simpler life. And so long as my business is funding my life, that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That's such great advice. All right. So, on that topic of advice, if you could give an entrepreneur kind of one core piece of advice, or what would you tell them?
I would say stay very curious. So, within my lifetime, I've had a ton of jobs. I've worked retail, I've worked marketing, I've worked sales, I've worked admin, I've worked jewelry production, I've worked bakery production, I have worked food production. Like I've worked for farms, I've worked for farmers markets, I've done a ton of stuff. And within that, I've always stayed very curious about how systems worked.
Mhm.
And what I found is that that's really helped me run my business to figure out how different parts of what I do are fully interconnected. And how different parts of the world are fully interconnected. And, there's never been a more important time to keep a focus on that because in my industry, we've got supply chain disruptions coming at us left and right, and being able to understand like how that's connected means that I'm better able to communicate to my customers like, hey, XYZ is going to be late because of this.
Yeah.
And it helps just make that connection for myself and for other people.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. I think a lot of people don't recognize the value in working in the space where you want to go. Right.
Hmm.
And that, especially like you said, I think you told me earlier that you worked in jewelry production. So
Yeah.
you knew what that was, but you also worked in admin. So you knew what that was. And it's not just, I want to be a baker and I know how to bake. Yeah, but do you know how to bake professionally? Do you know how to
Yes.
run a bakery? Right. You do those
these
things.
and these things because I, having the experience of doing jewelry production for a few years before I started my business, one of the things that it taught me was I still want to do this.
Yeah.
Whereas working in food production taught me I never want to own a restaurant. Right. And I think that, and it's not to say that like nobody should ever run a restaurant because nobody's going to enjoy it. Lots of people do, but you might want to try it out first
Yeah.
to make sure because some of these jobs come with a certain amount of lingo or stress or like anthropological systems. And so it's really good to like dig in and figure out like, would I feel comfortable in this space? Would I want
Yeah.
to do things differently? And to be able to have that experience, at all levels of a business, I think is really valuable. But staying curious, I think, is really important no matter what you do.
Yeah, love it. All right, awesome. So this podcast is brought to us by Climb the Small Business Book Club, and our two credos are continual learning and community building. So talk to me about your continual learning. What do you do to make sure you stay curious? Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm involved with a couple of organizations within the jewelry industry, and then I also just kind of like stay curious about other industries too that might cross over with it. So I'm involved with one organization called the Jewelry Glossary Project, where we are developing better language around how we describe things like ethics, sustainability,
Mm.
conflict free, to help define it not just for jewelry designers, but also potentially for consumers so that they can better understand what they're buying and what they're buying into. Within that, I've really been examining my own relationship with things, my own relationship with fashion. And I've been doing a lot of reading of around like how we can say reduce our dependency on things like fast fashion.
Mhm.
And that's also meant that I've gotten a lot more curious about economic systems like degrowth, which is
Mhm.
really about how we can kind of like reduce our spending and reduce so many things like reduce our consumerism and also possibly benefit the planet. And thinking about how that applies to small businesses,
Mhm.
I was talking before about how I did a thing that didn't follow my own vision. And part of that was somebody else's vision of you should always be growing as a business owner. And I do think like internally, like internal growth is really important, but do I have to grow to a $10 million business? What costs come with that? What does expansion mean? Do I want that? And that's really been like a core question for myself and also for my small business clients, because I've been noting a lot of burnout. And a lot of times that burnout is coming because someone's values and vision are not aligning with how they are currently running their business. And so it's about kind of like pulling back and saying like, okay, so are you growing because somebody else told you that you should? Or are you growing because you want to? Well, and if you're not growing because you want to, then do you have to?
Well, it's that most people became entrepreneurs because they wanted freedom and they wanted a certain lifestyle, and do not recognize that running an enormous business does not mean lots of freedom. And I mean, you might have money for your lifestyle, but you don't get to enjoy it because you're working.
Well, and sometimes growth does not necessarily, sometimes money does not necessarily follow growth, especially for like a founder owner, because growth always comes with more expenses.
Totally true.
Right? Like if you want to grow and expand your, say, jewelry production, it might mean hiring someone, and that's going to be money coming out of your budget. So do you have the money for that in your budget to also give yourself a raise? Right. So like it's asking yourself these questions, and like being a job creator is great. And all of these things are wonderful if that's what you want. And I think that's where I've been focusing, you know, for my clients, like drilling down on how much of this is about their vision and how much of this is about somebody else's. Because if you don't want all of that growth, if you don't want all of that management, you don't have to. There are other ways of building a business that might be a little bit smaller, but maybe ones that fund your life in a way that's healthy and fund your business in a way that's healthy. And if that means you never get beyond, say, 500,000, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's totally fine. You know, if you're profitable and you can afford things that you need, that might be okay. And if you're satisfied with that, and that's also another question I ask of my clients, are you satisfied with this? And if the answer is yes, then maybe growth isn't the answer for their business needs.
Right. And maybe they don't need to be putting, like you said, more out into the world, right?
Yes. Like the output. Like one of the books that's been really influential for me on this, and it's not specifically a business book, but I think a lot of small business owners, especially producers of things, can glean from, is a book. It's called Consumed by Aja Barber. And it's about our relationship with fast fashion, and also about how like colonialism and racism are sort of like tied up in all of these systems, and about how we can start to undo it. And sometimes it starts with like how we think about things and even the things that we produce. And what I've been noticing is people being able to have like perfectly healthy small businesses that make a profit and turn a profit that don't involve overproducing.
Right.
You know, like I think about brands like, I believe she closed recently, but Elizabeth Suzanne, who didn't produce, she produced to meet the demand that was there. She wasn't producing for a demand that she was trying to create. And I've always appreciated that about like certain like slower fashion brands. Like they're producing for what people want and not producing for a wish.
Right. And not trying to convince people they have to have it.
Exactly. Right? Yeah. It's a different relationship. And it really, like, even when I've applied it to my own business, it's really been beneficial to me to operate within a budget, which is also really important when you run a business.
Yeah.
Like operating within a budget, avoiding debt, those things can be amazing for your business and can actually give you a lot more flexibility and freedom because you'll have the cash on hand to do what you want with it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, so lots of amazing education. I get that book. What about community? Talk to me about community and how you've built your community of entrepreneurs around you.
Community, I think, is so vital and important. You know, it's so easy as a solo entrepreneur to kind of like tuck yourself away and just like never talk to anyone and just like head down, focus on your business. And like, there's times that that's necessary, but your community is really what fuels you. So I've had a few different communities that I've been a part of. I've had an entrepreneur group that's met up for like 10 years, and we're all different entrepreneurs. I have a couple of jewelry groups that I'm a part of that are other jewelers. I also have just people that I can call or text and say like, hey, where do you get this thing from? Right. And it's just like you sort of like leverage the hive mind for your business in this way about like, hey, I need this resource. I don't know where to get this kind of sapphire. I don't know where to get this kind of gold, or where does this kind of solder come from? So being able to have those people that you can call on. And then in return, they can also call on you. Like I just did that recently for a friend and colleague in the industry who was like, I'm struggling with this thing. I don't know why it's not working. And I was able to troubleshoot it for her. And I feel really good about how that helps create community in the business.
Yeah, absolutely. All about, pardon me, one of the books we're reading is Who, Not How, right? Mm-hmm. So instead of trying to figure out how to find those things you needed, you just figure out who you could call and expedited that by, whatever bajillion. But then also the key that giving is what causes you to get, right? Like that.
Yes. Yeah. And also like not... not gatekeeping, not being an information holder, because I think that is something that really stymies a lot of industries. So like people who are like, no, you can't know how this happened. Even though like you're not using some proprietary tool to make it, it's just like, nope, hide it away. And so I think for me and my community, we've really fostered this open relationship with asking and answering questions.
Nice. That's awesome. All right. Well, Sharon, our last question here is just talk to me. You've been a part of Renaissance Center as a coach for a number of years. You've been through the program. Just share with me your feelings, what impact a Renaissance has had on you.
I mean, early on when I took the classes, and I was trying to remember when I took them, but I think it was almost 10 years ago now, maybe 9 years ago. What it really did is it made me feel like it gave me legitimacy, I think is what I'm trying to say. It made me feel like, yes, now I can call myself an entrepreneur, because before going through the program, I didn't really know, even though I'd worked like admin jobs, I'd even done a little like light bookkeeping, but I didn't really know the terminology to describe my business or to describe it to someone else. And also the marketing part, like the elevator pitch, like I hadn't really considered how important that was to really drill down on the core of what my business is, to be able to tell someone else about it. And then as far as like coaching and teaching goes, I think I've been doing that for 5 or 6 years, and it's been so gratifying. I feel like I've made so many connections with other entrepreneurs. It's just been an inspiring group of students year after year after year, doing amazing things and learning amazing things, and being able to like see that process in action has been like so amazing. I love it.
Yeah. It's such a gift to be able to work with Renaissance. So yeah, it's been wonderful.
I agree.
All right. Well, Sharon, that's our podcast. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh my God. Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.
This podcast is brought to you by Climb the Small Business Book Club, where entrepreneurs go to learn, discuss, apply, and grow. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to subscribe at Apple, Spotify, or Google Podcasts, or follow us on Instagram at Climb Book Club. And always remember, mistakes are inevitable, perfection's impossible. So let's embrace the mistake.